All right, welcome to Resilient Voices and Beyond. This is kind of a bittersweet episode because it is episode 50. Man, it's been a long road, and I'm just so excited and I'm just ecstatic because this is one of something that I was like, no, I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna focus on something else. And I just felt something moving me to kind of do this podcast this year. And I'm glad I have because it has been such a asset to so many different people um, that I am learning, and it's so reassuring to be able to provide this space for alumni and stakeholders to be able to educate and talk about reform and the stigmas and labels that are out there, but also their experience and their expertise and their advocacy, and the list goes on. But thank you guys for your support, your words of encouragement, not only to myself and for the podcast, but also to the guests I've had on here and networking and connecting with them. So thank you. You guys know I can talk for days. I'm going to shut my mouth and have my guest introduce herself.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me on. I'm a huge fan and I'm really excited to be here, especially for the big 50, the 50th episode. So, my name is Constance Iannetta, or Connie for short. I am a foster care alumni, third generation foster care alumni, foster kinship adoptive parent, national child welfare advocate, and professional. I also work with certifying resource homes and in the community relations aspect of like partnership building in an agency. I myself was in foster care until 18. When I aged out, I kind of struggled a little bit. I found my healing and peer support and my purpose in helping others, and jumped right into advocacy. And that's kind of how I found my footing. So I joined together with members of my family. We decided that we were going to kind of change our family legacy from one of trauma and hurt to one of strength and grit. And we first started more like a call to action, Foster Strong. And eventually that led to building this kind of resource hub at fosterstrong.org, just to kind of share some of our experiences, inspire just kindness and healing and, humility, elevate community awareness, and, overall ensure accessibility of resources for the foster care community. Really just to make sure that other families didn't have generational foster care involvement like we did. So from legislative testimony to state and national board affiliations. I've kind of done it all from like YAB to Youth Move to FCA National, FCA Pennsylvania. I've really just tried to use my voice and my lived experience to, you know, bring light to these issues and stuff in the most strategic and best way. Just to change the way things are and everything, and to hope that people don't have the same struggles that I did when I was 18 exiting foster care.
Well, before we get started with my first question, I just want to say thank you for being on today. It is an honor and a privilege, to be able to have you on and be able to capture your experience and your expertise, in all that you have done and do within advocacy, within the child welfare arena.
Well, thank
So,
you.
with that being said, no problem. No problem. My first question, you said you listened to them, so you already know what I'm going to ask. I'd like to dive deep into your experience to whichever comfortability you're willing to share. Um, for sure. Because I had a brain fart. Sorry. Um, so my first question is, um, could you walk us through your experience from wherever you will feel comfortable sharing at the beginning to where you are now?
Okay. Well, like I said, for my family, it was generational. So my grandmother was in care, my mom was in care. So um, I kind of grew up with like the the kind of threat of like the big scary DHS in the background.
Mhm.
So, a chaotic family environment kind of led to me being put in foster care just shy of my 12th birthday. So I was around 11. And, I had some great placements. I had some not so great placements. I was in between, regular general foster care homes and group homes when there was no bed to place me in and stuff like that in a regular home. And what I really noticed during my time in care was just kind of the discrepancies in like services and the treatment of others. I actually was like the kind of scrappy inner city girl going into the middle of nowhere because they moved me into a very rural part of Pennsylvania for foster care. A lot of times when I talk to young people and everything, I tell the story of my first night in foster care where I was chased by a goat, and I hate goats. So uh, not a fan at all. And that social worker didn't help me at all. She booked it, papers flying and everything. But no, they sent me into the middle of nowhere. It was complete and total culture shock. I come from a really diverse family. These were not people that were accepting of any of that. I'm part Asian. My family, they like to say they have more colors than a Puerto Rican Day Parade. I mean, like they are very, very diverse. I mean, we have everything. We have Black, white, Asian, Hispanic, everything. Yes. So yeah, I mean, we have everything in our family. So for us, everybody's equal and everything. And, we are very accepting and loving and stuff. And I was moved into an environment where that wasn't really the case. So that was really difficult for me. So there was a lot of culture shock, being from city to rural to just a different way of life, and even faith related things where I had other people's faith pushed upon me and being forced to like kind of practice their faith and everything. And it was really difficult. And I mean, I always had kind of an awareness of things, and awareness of people. And I was always very much kind of like an empath, even at a young age. So when I saw people being mistreated, or I saw things being done differently, or others being treated differently, I spoke up about it. So from things having to do with, I had a 9 p.m. curfew for my senior prom, even though I was set to age out, weeks later. I think it was like 2 weeks later, or just overall not having, age appropriate freedoms because I was in this like foster care bubble. However, I was pretty much like tossed out on my rear at 18 years old and expect to just kind of sink or swim. So, I was really upset about that. So like when I aged out and everything, I went through 2 years of struggling a lot. And, I was in an unhealthy relationship. I was struggling, just with my mental health and like processing, that bubble bursting from foster care, and housing issues, and just staying with friends and family and back and forth and stuff. And it was really interesting in my case because they had started like the legislation for fostering connections. And it just so happened that before I turned 21, like when I was 20, I suddenly was assigned an independent living worker, and she changed everything for me. I mean, even today, she's still a huge part of my life, a mentor, almost like a mom figure in my life. So I'm so thankful that she came into the picture and helped me kind of enroll in college, and create a resume, and introduce me to a lot of things, even like stuff with the ongoing like advocacy in Pennsylvania with the youth advisory board and stuff like that. So, and from there, it was on. Like I met all these people that were just like me and feisty like me, and I found so much community in these people. Their family, even now, just this past Sunday, I hosted a bunch of alumni in my home for, kind of like a family get together. We do it all the time. We celebrate, births and birthdays and weddings and things like that. We celebrate our successes, and we also band together when someone needs support and everything. And it's just really nice. So we have a really, really strong network in Pennsylvania when it comes to our foster care alumni. So it's great.
Awesome, awesome. You dropped a lot of nuggets in there, and I'm gonna do my best to kind of highlight some of the ones that stood out specifically. So, you experienced a couple of displacements, from foster home to group home, and some getting chased by a goat,
Yep. Goat trauma is very real. That's a thing, apparently, I found out. So, yes.
It's not funny. It's
Farm
not
living is
funny,
not for
but
me.
wow. So, in that experience, I want to go back some because you talked about mental health after aging out and that scope and what have you. What did mental health and self-care look like? Did you have an understanding of that in throughout your time in care? You know?
Well, I think, in care, I mean, the mental health aspect, it was kind of like forced upon me and others, in the foster homes and stuff like that, and group homes where we had mandatory therapy. And actually,
Mhm.
every single one of my foster siblings, like, they were forced to take medication. And my
Mhm.
mom and my foster mom actually teamed up together to advocate against me being put on medication because I didn't need it. So, but it seemed like everyone had a diagnosis.
Mhm.
And then it was really common. Like, now you hear things, well, you still hear like oppositional defiant disorder and stuff like that, but like, I feel like RAD is the new ODD type of thing. But there was always some sort of label being put out there, and medication. So you had like bi-weekly mandatory visits with therapists and stuff like that. And I remember at one point I had like a mobile therapist. So I thought it was a joke. These people just came out, wrote things down, submitted everything. And like, it was on these like reports that came out every month that everybody had to sign, like the foster parents and everything, and the biological parents. And I just thought, shrinks were quacks, like I didn't put a lot of stuff into it, but actually for my senior year, I started looking a lot into, what my graduation project was in the beginning of the year. And at that time, I actually really wanted to be a behavioral specialist, because I was trying to kind of piece together questions I had about my own family's history. And a lot of it was rooted in like mental health and trauma. And so as I kind of dove into that, things started making a little bit of sense, as far as, the trauma that different people had experienced and stuff like that. And then I started kind of looking at things through a different lens, where it was um, kind of like, that like what happened to you, like what led to this stuff, not just like you're being terrible or you're being unreasonable or you're being X, Y, and Z. So removing the judgment and just looking at it in a more empathetic light. So that was a big eye opener for me. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think I mean, after aging out, I was so focused on surviving, I didn't have room for much else. I was making very poor decisions just out of a need to survive and stuff like that. And I mean, honestly, today I am so very thankful for just landing on my feet, like I live a very grateful life. Like, I'm very grateful all the time. Like, I can't say that enough. I just, things happened and it was rough, and I'm very lucky to be okay now, despite the circumstances.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I'm just dropping these nuggets, and people probably gonna laugh at me because they're like, he keeps saying nuggets, but the breadcrumbs, nuggets, tips, tidbits, little pieces of wisdom, whichever you want to call them. Just the aspect of um the medication piece, that's something I've experienced personally, and something that I am completely aware of that, steadily happens across the nation, with, therapy, and the over medication or, just improper treatment in that aspect. But that's a podcast for a whole nother day
Yes.
in itself.
Because I mean, the reality is, what child, what teenager is not defiant in some way, or does not get hyperactive in some way. I mean, yes, at times it is needed. However, those of us who were in care, years ago and stuff like that, like we saw a different way, where all the kids were medicated. And quite honestly, many of them, walked around like they were zombies. And then you wonder why they didn't know how to, like, they didn't do well in school, or they were in a specialized school. I actually had, foster siblings that were going to school and actually doing like color in the numbers and stuff like that. And, junior and senior year and stuff like that. Like they weren't being challenged. And then you wonder why they age out and they don't know how to do their own laundry or prepare a meal and stuff like that. And at that time, before fostering connections, the life skills weren't there and they weren't mandatory. I remember I got a booklet, I think it was like 50 pages long. It was like multiple choice, like what to do in a grease fire, what do you do this? Everybody kind of cheated, or just, they didn't fill it out, and like the workers would just like circle a bunch of things. I mean, it was such a joke how it was then, and it's actually nice to see the progress that has happened since. Not to say that there's still not improvements to be made, but I mean, I only need to look at my own family tree to look at the changes in child welfare, and the progress that's been made and where improvements can still be had.
And what a unique lens to be able to look, at 3 generations of experience and care.
And then I went on to do kinship for the 4th generation of my family on 2 different sides of the family. So one side, my 2 older children, I adopted them after kinship care. And then on the other side of my family, I did kinship care, and that child was reunified. So that was like a wonderful, happy, ending to their foster care experience and everything. And we were all so joyful about it. So it takes work. I mean, like with our family, like we really dug in and we said, like, do we want this to continue? Do we want this to be our family legacy? Do we want, generations to come to suffer from our mistakes or our lack of awareness, to focus on our healing and stuff like that? So I mean, we're not for it. Like we wanted to do better and be better, and so we decided to all dig in. And it's been difficult at times, but it's also been like inspiring and a bonding thing as well.
Awesome. And if you don't mind, I want to take, a step back, because I think it's important, because there's so many different avenues about your life and your experience, but let alone your expertise too, that I know we probably won't be able to get them all, but I want to highlight some very key points that we talked about before the show and also right now. Generational, foster care is a thing. It's a real thing that is happening in society, and it's something that has affected your life. But you were able to reunify at some point with your family, and to have a dialogue with your family and turn it from maybe negative at some point to something positive, and decide as a family unit. Because I don't know if the listeners may grasp how powerful that is and how rare that may be, but as a family unit to be like, we need to do better. I remember, go ahead.
Maybe it's faith, maybe it's, a reasonable expectations of that. Like I tend to think big, like, I mean, I always want to like do better and be better and like, think outside the box. And like, we all have those moments where we want to have, the traditions, we want to have a certain thing. And like, I knew the type of life that I wanted when I was growing up. And I was like, my kids are going to have that. And so some of it was just being a very stubborn, pushy parent, saying, that's it. We're all in here. Like, we're all in this, bringing in for a bear hug. Like, we're digging in. Like, we're going to be a close family again. Like, but a lot of it is like, at the end of the day, we all loved each other, like we all just had so much pain and stuff like that. And a lot of circumstances, some that were beyond our control. And like, I say it a lot that some of the supports that are out there for parents nowadays, like birth parents, would have benefited my family greatly. I probably never would have gone into foster care if my mom had had access to a lot of the services and hadn't been penalized for things. Like I said, they took me out of the inner city and put me in like rural Pennsylvania. My mom had like a very like a used car that would break down or overheat and stuff like that. So if she didn't make a visit, instead of saying, well, how can we support you, or can we bring her closer for visits, which would have made sense, it was something that was used against her in court and stuff like that. So and I will say, you also, one, I always believe, give people grace, give people grace, give yourself grace always. We're all kind of steps away at any time from, our world kind of taking a hit or something like that, with, just falling on ill circumstances and stuff like that. And I would like to hope, if something ever happened to me, that people would give me grace and support me. If something ever happened where somebody had to take care of my children or something like that. And we have to look at that, because at the end of the day, like, majority of birth parents, like, they love their kids. They want to do better. Maybe they haven't been exposed. Maybe they don't know how to do healthy parenting. Maybe they don't have the resources or need some support in like finding a job or counseling or whatever the case may be. So like, always give grace, and definitely give yourself grace, because we're all human, we're all flawed, we all make mistakes and stuff like that. So um and a big thing is, just kind of doing the work. Like, that's it, just doing the work. I mean, we're a family, we're loud and we argue and we hug, and but at the end of the day, we're still together, we're still family. And I think while I was in foster care, it was almost like that was trying to be erased in a lot of ways, where even on everything, not just on like court documents and paperwork, but also caseworker interactions, they would always say, oh, your family of origin. I'm like, stop saying that. Like, they're my family. Like, call them my family, not family of origin. And I would get so upset, and no one even listened to me and like heard me out for why I was getting upset about that. Um so yeah, I think it's definitely been quite the experience and everything like that. But I'm very grateful because, whereas I had time away from, my parents and stuff like that. And there were times when I was, raised by other people and stuff. Like, my mom is a stellar grandparent to my kids. And you also have to believe that people are capable of redemption too, with the right supports and time to heal and stuff like that.
You know, I work with a nonprofit that uses the foster care recovery model, and that model talks about awareness, understanding, acceptance, and forgiveness. And I'm a firm believer that each person that goes through the system, for whichever number of reasons, have to come to a place where they work through those individual steps within self, and then in your case, take it to family, and work through those individual steps as a unit, you know. And it's awesome to hear that you not only did the work with itself, also was like, look, I like, if anything to do with myself, I want my own children to have a sense of family and know that, my family, know my family, at least, And one other thing that I hear you saying, if you don't mind me pointing out, but, I feel like it's prominent, is that at a certain aspect, the system worked against your family and trying to reunify, trying to preserve that family net. And from my experience in advocacy and sitting on CPS and prevention committees, these seem to be a trend, where there's disparity gaps in minority communities. It's not just black and brown, but in minority, community, people who are outside of that middle class gap, getting children taken away because of deemed neglect. But also what that comes to play a part is we live in a society where, things are expensive. Life is high price. And unfortunately, but fortunately, we have children, and sometimes we're not fully prepared, but we're willing to love that child with all that we have. But sometimes we don't have all the necessary things which our state agencies deem that you need to have in order to provide a safe and stable and loving home.
That's
But
so
that is a
true.
standard that has been created by a broken system to, and I want to make sure I get this word correctly, compress and come down on minority communities. And that's one thing that we have to understand is that this system was built to subject Black women, to subject, brown women and what have you. And we are working off of this and trying to make a discriminate system be functionable today. And unfortunately, it's not as functional because we're still seeing those gaps happen. But that's a podcast for
I
another
was gonna
day.
say, I
Right?
mean, given my
Go
Asian
ahead.
roots and how it has been the Asian side of my family impacted by foster care for generations, and the fact that, I mean, a lot of our culture is tied to like mistrust and not, involving people outside of our family in our problems in business and stuff like that. I mean, that would be a whole other episode. So,
Mhm.
but I completely agree. So, I mean, I think the system is flawed. I mean, in a perfect world, child welfare should be set up in a way like if people are struggling, they could reach out and say, I need support, and then get their children back. But
Mhm.
we're in a day and age where there are terms like foster to adopt and other things that
Mhm.
impede on that and stuff like that. I mean, we have to make sure that those people that are certifying to become resource parents and stuff like that, that they are supporting reunification and also understanding trauma and understanding family dynamics and cultural things. And I mean, there's so many things that go into it. Every case is not black and white. There's always going to be things in gray areas, and we just have to look at things through a different lens. And I think a good sign is that there's so many people with lived expertise that are climbing their way up the ranks in the field of child welfare and leading, nonprofit organizations and then some, and saying this needs to change. And when people are like, at the top of the like top tier and decision makers doing this, that gives me some hope.
Definitely. And I want to be clear when I say this because some people may get mad when I have these conversations. But if you don't have no kind of emotion from these conversations, I don't know what to tell you because I'm trying to invoke these conversations to happen in the home because they're not. A lot of people still don't know what foster care is. A lot of people don't understand what the child welfare system engulfs. Like there's still people that don't know. There are a lot of our legislative and political figures that don't know what they're voting on. So it's important that we have these conversations to be able to educate our community and our people. But um, going back to originally what I was going to say is that yes, granted, there are some situations where a kid does deserve to be removed. There are, you know, but also we are getting to a modern state where we're recognizing that our system is not fair to all parties. So we need to put a bigger lens on what prevention looks like, what offering resources look like, what does when a person gets allegations, what does that process look like? As far as does it have biases? Does it, does it subject one person more than it does the other? So that's one thing that I'm being able to see, and it's awesome because when we talk about reform, we talk about change, that is where it needs to happen at the very beginning,
Oh,
you know,
absolutely.
at
I
the
mean,
at
we
the
need to have
very
more
beginning.
services because the reality is most people assume that kids are in foster care because their parents are criminals or drug addicts, or they themselves are criminals or drug addicts, like, the juvenile delinquents and stuff like that. That's not always the case. I mean, I've seen situations where a single parent had a fatal disease and stuff like that or something, or they died and the system had to take custody of the child and stuff because they had no one to relinquish custody to and stuff like that. And so
Mhm.
there are situations that really just gut you, like, and it's not always what people presume it is. There are so many stigmas associated with foster care and what a foster child looks like. I mean, you and I are having this conversation and we're okay, like, I mean, it's like we're not the boogeyman or anything like that. So,
Mhm.
and really just like it's so important to look at, what a foster child looks like in terms of like, um, you know, we shouldn't be blamed and we're not accountable for things that happen when we were children, I mean, and I think a lot of times we're penalized because of things having to do with circumstances that are completely entirely out of our control as children. And for those young people that, react, then they're penalized for that. And suddenly they have a label and medication, or
Mhm.
they get moved to another placement or put in residential or something like that. I mean, I think many of us know the frustration of feeling like we are like stuck, or we're not heard or we don't have a voice, which is why it's so important for us now to speak on things. And that's the importance of like your podcast and stuff. And like, also, I think what a former foster youth, a foster care alumni looks like, the perception that we're also damaged. Yes, trauma is something that you will carry with you every day. You can age out of foster care, you cannot age out of trauma. However, we can be okay. We can be successful contributing members of society. We can be CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. We can be graduates. We can be parents. But the important thing is, one, we're showing hope to like those who are still in the system. We're not giving them a barrage of like sad statistics and ACEs outcomes and all these things, because quite honestly, if you look at ACEs scores, like I should be homeless, jailed, like all these things. And I was like, I'm pretty okay now, like there's always, I guess, the exception to the norm, I guess. But I
Mhm.
believe that like we get put on like an unfair pedestal with this like foster care success thing, those of us who are doing well and, especially in the advocacy realm and stuff like that. And like, being a foster care success doesn't have to mean a college degree. It doesn't have to mean, you're making a fortune. It doesn't have to mean like awards and accolades and stuff like that. Sometimes being a success is literally just getting out of bed every day and putting one foot in front of the other. It's unfair to measure everyone and hold them to this high bar, because I remember being a young advocate and stuff and being put on stage and at podiums and speaking on behalf of agencies and counties and stuff like that. And quite honestly, it was suffocating because I felt that there was no room for me to be a failure or for any error. And I felt like I didn't have the room to feel things,
Mhm.
and even to process my own emotions. And when I did give myself the freedom to do that and like protect my own peace, it was amazing. And then everything just fell into place after that. So
Wow. I wanna circle back because I don't want to miss on this aspect. You talked about aging out and being pretty much all right now, dap it up, there you go. Could you break that down for me? Like what how did that happen?
it's interesting because I look at, they had talked to me about like, oh, where are you going to go? Like they really just needed an address on paper where I was going to go when I left the system. That's all they needed. And it's so odd to me that like a few weeks before my 18th birthday, I had this ridiculously early prom curfew given to me by the agency, not the foster parents. They thought it was ridiculous. And so I had this like 9 p.m. curfew for senior prom, and yet 2 weeks later or something, like I was completely out on my rear, So, but I had no preparation, I had to kind of learn to be more self-sufficient and stuff. And looking back on it now, I'm like, there's so many things I just didn't learn. Like I don't know how to swim. I don't know how to ride a bike. I actually dyed Easter eggs with my kids 2 years ago. It was my first time dyeing Easter eggs. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I missed out on so many things. And all those things just pile and pile and pile. And then you're looking at the world and you're like, wow, I'm out of foster care. I'm not under people's thumb. I'm not being micromanaged in every aspect of my life. And then you're like, but what do I do? Where do I go? It's no surprise that a lot of young people age out into codependent relationships or unhealthy relationships. The system is not designed for independence, not the way it is. I mean, yes, even now they're inviting more young people to the table and asking them to speak on behalf of themselves in court and stuff like that, but it's not enough. And that's why I personally love the opportunity to mentor young people in care or fresh out of care and stuff like that, because I'm like, I too was a knucklehead in your shoes before. And like, if they have the opportunity to stay in care past 18 until 21 and get, their bills paid and take advantage of like college and support and stuff, I'm like, take it, like utilize everything you can while you can, because when that bubble bursts, like you have to be ready. And I think it's just a lot to process. So I think it does really help people to hear from other people who have been in those scenarios and stuff like that and really can relate.
Yeah. Can we think about that for a second? That aspect of when the people age out and we see them go down what we deem a negative pathway, whether it be a toxic or codependent relationship where they end up being abused or having domestic situations happening, or end up it's unstable and it's dysfunctional. Or we see them going down a substance path, and that can be, alcohol or whatever illicit drug, or we see them ended up in a life of crime, this day and age, we see them, depression, suicide, we see it in sex trafficking, human trafficking, but let's talk about the elephant in the room. How did they get to that point? Were they properly set up? Were they properly supported? And I know some people, there's a lot of evolution that has happened in some states and what have you. But one of the biggest things that I want to speak to is the aspect of states utilizing mentorship and peer support, and how that could change statistics surrounding around when you age out, they go to this thing or that thing. Because when you get someone that have lived experience and you involve them in your state agencies, and I know some states actually have peer support on staff with their state agencies and what have you, that work with youth and everything like that, but it's not across the board nationally. And you're seeing numbers drop statistically with people falling into these barriers and these obstacles after they age out. But it's not something that we have deemed or thought like, maybe this needs to be something that's federally implemented because it's working here. We're still seeing people,
Which is interesting, because if you look at other populations, not foster children, and you look at like say veterans, or you look at even people going through addiction and like recovery and stuff like that, it's pretty much standard, that they join together, have their community, understand, like everyone recognizes that, them having their own type of peer support and all this stuff, like it helps, it shows, unity and everything like that. Like, why are we any different? In fact, I think, what is it? Former foster youth have experienced PTSD at a higher rate than US war veterans. Like that is significant. So, which is another reason why I always think it's goofy. Like we have foster care month and mental health awareness month, and both are in May and they're so intertwined. And, I'm always stuck between, supporting both. Cause like, I went through stuff with anxiety and depression and even suicide attempts and stuff. I went through the unhealthy relationships, the codependency, the being abused and stuff like that. And I even know I myself didn't fall into any type of like trafficking and stuff, but I had seen foster siblings fall into it and stuff like that. And, females in particular can be very much sexualized while in foster care because some of the things I was told by foster fathers um, isn't really appropriate for me to say on your podcast, but it was extremely inappropriate. And it was appalling. I mean, I look back on it now and I'm like, is it really any surprise that this stuff happens? Is it really any surprise that these young people are coming out of the system with low self-worth and not understanding that like they're gems and they can do and be whatever they want to be? Like it's really just they need to be nurtured and lifted up just like any other child.
It's wild to think that when a person makes it into foster care, everything is okay. And I get this idea when I do panels for incoming social workers, panels for foster parents or adoptive parents, and like, okay, we adopt the baby, nothing, they're not going to have to deal with no or they're, we adopt a little kid, or we take them in, it's going to be all okay. We're going to give them love. That's far from true. We don't realize how many different components within our systems that are re-traumatizing. I can pull a list of people who would tell me that, yeah, I had great foster parents and what have you, but they weren't really attentive and I was being groomed, by, older males or older females, which when I got out, when, they really didn't want like a really full on aftercare kind of support, it's kind of like they helped me age out and get things going. When I got out, it was easy for me to fall into those relationships because they were there and willing to support me, or, I was surrounded around that stuff when I was younger. So, when I aged out of residential, it was easy for me to go back to the streets to sell drugs or, utilize drugs because it gave me that escape because my worker didn't give me no support for as, finding full on stability. So it's like, gotta fend for myself.
Not only that, if you're perceived as a bad kid, you're gonna start hanging out with the bad crowd. You're just gonna accept it.
You're gonna go where
like
you
I'm
want
the
them.
bad kid, remember? Like that's why people were shocked. Like, people that knew me growing up and stuff, like I was like a scrappy little thing. And to see me now, like I'm so calm as an adult, because I found my peace, I protect my peace and everything. But man, was I a hothead when I was younger. And, you know, I'm very thankful that I kind of worked through that at a young age when it was safe to do so and everything. I know a lot of people follow and like they go into adulthood still like kind of processing their trauma, or they've suppressed it for so long that it's like it just spews out every which way, and then they have like so many trauma responses and stuff. And it's really difficult because we also have to understand like there's people that are not like you and I and like others and that are still really struggling and stuff. And so that's the good thing about like the alumni community. I mean, we are so accepting of all in every space that we might be in. And it's so safe. And like, we also like really nurture each other, like I can't speak to it enough because, as I became a parent, and keep in mind, I became a kinship parent and then an adoptive parent long before like I had a biological child. So, I was like the new parent while also going to like court dates and birth family visits and managing family dynamics because it was kinship and everything. I hadn't a clue what I was doing. I didn't anticipate having kids. I was newly married, canceled my honeymoon, and everything flipped on its head. So, but really, I mean, these are like my family and stuff like that. They stepped it up, like parenting tips, shipments from all over the country with all types of baby stuff. I didn't know what was what or what all these things were and goofy gadgets and stuff for babies. But like, man, was that a learning experience. And, becoming a parent is one of the most humbling things in the world. But going through it as like kinship first was like a whole other wheelhouse, because, first I had a toddler and then I had a newborn, and then I did then I had a teenager, and then all of a sudden I had a biological child like out of nowhere. So in the first 4 years of marriage, my husband and I had 4 children in all different ways, foster care, kinship care, biological and stuff like that. Things move very quickly.
Wow. So if you don't mind, because I know we talked about this before, but I think it's very pertinent, as we're going through this journey of different topics, um, to speak on what is it like to have a functional relationship with someone who has been through maybe a lifetime of trauma, and how do you live continually, with that?
I think, well, you mean me as like a parent or me like as in my relationship, like
Look,
with
since
my
you gave me options, both.
So I'll say as a parent, like I said, even from the beginning, like I never anticipated being a parent because in my family, foster care was generational. I was like, I'm not going to have a kid so I could screw them up and they'll end up in
Mm,
DHS and all this other stuff. So like for me, it wasn't, somewhere deep down, I wanted a family. I just didn't like, I had a lot of fear in my heart about it. And so, my husband and I, we were like newly married. We just had our wedding and we were getting ready to like go on honeymoon. And then we got the call to do kinship and stuff. And we didn't blink. I mean, we just dove right in. I mean, he went a little spazzy because like I sent him to the store to get a car seat to pick it up. And he had he had a very nice car at the time. So on his very nice car, he came back with like a hunting canoe on his car. It was like a camouflage canoe on a Cadillac. And so he had like a camouflage canoe and he was like it's a fishing canoe, a hunting canoe or something, and then like a fishing bow. And I was like, so wait, it's a camouflage canoe because the fish won't see it come in. And then you have this thing like, when are you going to use this? And he never used this darn thing. It ended up under a porch and became like that Iannetta home for wayward bunnies and stuff. But the point is, we both kind of like lost it because we're like, oh my God, we have a child coming here. Like, what are we going to do? But, everything fell into place. And I mean, Brian and I have a really great relationship. We take everything in stride. We both have really good senses of humor. I definitely probably am the more serious of the two, but we're both very quirky. People often see him with me, supporting me or assisting in different things, even with advocacy. When I did Shadow Day with FCA National and stuff as staff, I had a pod and Brian had a pod too. We had rival pods and everything. And going to the White House and stuff like that, or hosting like the foster walks nationally and stuff like that. Brian often like stepped in as like the MC and stuff like that. So, but I won't say it's easy. I mean, Brian and I have a marriage that most people perceive as like, we have this picture perfect family. Our kids are like stunningly gorgeous. That's my unbiased opinion, but they're like ridiculously cute and smart and gorgeous, and they're just like such a joy to parent and stuff. But we're not perfect, like we make mistakes too. I mean, at first we were just trying to be like the perfect parents. Like we had these parent projects that the daycare used to send. Ours would be like laminated and stuff. Or like we stayed up till 3 a.m. making some like over the top shirt for our 2-year-old for a breast cancer walk at the school and stuff. Like, I mean, we were trying to be so perfect, and that's where that giving yourself grace comes into play, because we don't have to be perfect parents. We have to be loving parents, and we have to be the parents that we want, like for our children and stuff like that, and that will make them thrive. So and in terms of our marriage, I mean, there's been some things, I mean, it's hard, I mean, both of us kind of grew up with like, I don't know, interesting childhoods and stuff like that. And I think we've both grown up with like the loud and the messy and a little bit chaotic and stuff like that. And when we come home, we want to have peace, like we want to be in a safe space and everything like that. And early on, because we were together a long time before I even said yes to like engagement and stuff like that. Like I think we were together 8 years before we got engaged. And just little things from like every time. I had been used to moving so much throughout my life. It wasn't until we were in our first home that we purchased for 8 months before I even unpacked my boxes. I was so used to just moving all the time and not setting down roots, little things like that come up here and there. Or there was a fire alarm that went off in my work, in my office. a year or so ago, and everybody drops everything and rushes out the door, and they're standing outside, and here I left my cell phone, my keys, everything on my desk, and I had all the contents of my snack drawer. So I'm sitting there outside eating all my snacks, and everybody's like, "What are you doing? Like, these are your priorities?" And I was like, "I stress eat, man." Like, I was like, and I wanted all my snacks. Like, that was where my mind went, because, I remember being in care and having like locked food pantries and stuff like that in places. Like, I definitely have like some food issues, like here and there, that like, sometimes poke out, in certain times. I always have snacks in my purse. Like, my kids know it. They're like, they're always like, "Oh, what do you have?" and stuff like that. So, there's little things that have popped up, but I think there's so many things in marriage that are influenced by our trauma and how we've processed it and stuff like that, from, faith to fidelity to financial planning to family planning and stuff like that. And I mean, I'm very blessed that I found a man that, like, he and I are like eye to eye on almost everything, like we really we fit well together. So for that, I'm very grateful.
And I have more questions, but importantly, for those people, because I want to capture this in this conversation that we're having right now. Um, for those young adults, those transition age youth, that are dating, wanting a sense of family, or or looking towards marriage at some point, what advice do you have for them, that you can give as someone who has dated, someone who is married now for a number of years now and has a unit to look towards and to protect and to secure.
Well, years ago, I used to say that I would either never get married, or I would be like Liz Taylor and have like 6, 7, 8 husbands. So, um, so it's funny how things work out, like the husband, the kids, and all that stuff. But the biggest thing is, know your standards, set the bar high, like really don't settle. And I mean, people say that stuff so loosely, but I never settled, like when it came down to like what I wanted in the future. I mean, early on when Brian and I were just dating, like, first of all, like he and I knew each other very well because his oldest brother married one of my close friends. So we had been in each other's lives for quite a while. So the trust was built and stuff like that, and the comfort level. And um, but early on in our relationship, before it went to like engagement and marriage and kids and stuff like that, like we knew what we wanted long term, like I knew, I wanted to be married in a church. I knew, that we wanted to live in a certain area. We can agree on decorating, which is a really big thing in marriage, let me tell you. Like, that's a big thing, but we can agree on these things. So, and even like when we were buying our first home and stuff like that, we agreed on everything, like what we liked, what we didn't like. So it's not always the case. Like, sometimes people are very opposite. He is more outgoing and stuff like that. But I would just say, do not lower your standards and don't look to. So I didn't have a lot of examples of what, a strong, healthy marriage looked like. And so what I had to do is kind of pull pieces of ones that I did know of, whether they were fictional or real. It could have been, a foster family I lived with that always held hands when they walked through the mall or something. Or my foster mom was really funny. She would always go into Bath and Body Works and spray my foster dad with like a million scents. And he would be so grumbly because he was stinking of all these perfumes and stuff. But like, that was really cute, And so just their banter and stuff like that. And I kind of, you know, brought that into, my relationship and stuff like that. Like, Brian and I have a great banter. Like, everybody that knows us knows that, like just the way we interact with each other. And I'm just like, you are ridiculous all the time. He will sing to me in the middle of the grocery store all the time. And it's super embarrassing, but also equally adorable. So, yeah. And I mean, keep in mind, like, we're also showing our kids what kind of marriage they want to have someday, and what love looks like. So that's another thing. I think a lot of times when you're young and you're out of care, like, so many times people want to settle down really quickly because, or even have a child very quickly because they want somebody to love them unconditionally. Like you ache for that type of just unconditional love and acceptance and like someone to nurture and like, take your time, like that's the best advice I can say is take your time, don't lower your standards, um, surround yourself with good people, people that you trust, don't let yourself get hurt and don't hurt others. So that's basically it.
And I would add to that piece right there is do your work first.
Yes.
Do your work first. And what I mean by do your work is me and Connie has mentioned this, doing your work means making sure that you have processed or have begun to process your trauma or your hurt because we have a tendency to project that out
And
in
it'll
many
spill
different
into
facets.
every aspect of your life. It will spill into your
Mhm.
job. It will spill into school. It will spill into your relationship, your parenting, every which way. So absolutely, process your trauma, protect your peace, do all those things. I mean, it's really, really important. Establish healthy boundaries and stuff. I think a lot of us try to navigate, having people in our life that aren't healthy and stuff like that.
Mhm.
You can have people in your life, but at a healthy distance. And that's something that with maturity, you learn to do.
And one thing I like for those young adults and those people who are in care that may listen to this and come across it, one thing I want to say is when you get ready to have a relationship with someone, whether it be family, friend, or what have you, actually look at the definition of what you're labeling that person is in that life. And I understand certain people won't fit the specific definition, but for aspects of a friend, the definition of what a real friend, a true friend looks like.
Yes.
Because one thing I did personally, I don't know about you, is everybody was my friend. If you came into my life, you was my friend. I had to realize that everybody is not a friend. Everyone does not have my betterment at heart, and that was a really a big piece of my journey in transitioning out that, I utilize that word friend lightly. A friend can, there's levels to friendship, I believe too, but also having that person that is a confidant, having that person that got your back, that's not afraid to tell you the truth or be honest with you, you know.
That's so
Um,
true. Even like a mentor and stuff, because a
yeah.
mentor doesn't have to be like a teacher or someone that's like, you can have a mentor that's just a few years older than you. That's why, a
Mhm.
lot of us alumni, we mentor younger individuals and stuff like that. Or, it can be a coach, it can be, someone from your church. I mean, definitely build up your village, man. Like, I mean, that village will carry you through some really difficult times, and don't be afraid of that. Like, just like you, Michael, said that, like, you were the one who was kind of like, everybody's my friend and stuff like that. I was like the anti that. Like, I was like, I don't like anybody. Like, you guys can kick rocks, man. Like, I don't want any parts, because keep in mind, like, I was a scrappy little Philly thing. So like,
Mhm.
I mean, it's funny. I said about, FosterStrong is kind of like our family's mantra and stuff like that. Like, my mom had two other ones that she drilled into me at a young age. And the other one was yes, I can, because like, I could do anything and be at anything and stuff. My mom was always really big on encouraging me. And the other one was DTA, don't trust anybody. So,
Mm.
and that was something, I also lived by for the longest time. I was like, I don't trust anybody. And especially coming out of an environment, that was also in a time when people didn't put as much into like HIPAA and confidentiality and foster homes. So
Mhm.
like, I had foster parents that literally spread all my business through and things about like my case and everything throughout their whole family and friends and whoever. Like, I would literally be standing next to them and they'd just be talking to some random person they bumped into at the mall about things that they had no right to share and stuff like that. Like, I'm actually so grateful that social media did not exist while I was in care. It wasn't prevalent like it is now and stuff, just because, you know, as a foster and adopted parent, I definitely see the benefits of a lot of the social media groups and stuff like that for those populations, and to have like kind of people to stand off to and to get support and encouragement from. But man, keep all the gritty details about someone's like history or their diagnoses and stuff like that, like off of social media, because, just I say this to people that I work with because I work at an agency, but I'll also say this now. You do not know what these youth will become someday. And Lord help you if they become an advocate, because they could be standing on a stage or on a podcast talking about you. Like, don't put out their business. Like, I'm so serious, because you don't know what they'll become. You don't know who they want to become. Like, there are people that were in foster care that became judges and senators and all types of stuff. You don't know what their path is. Don't do anything that could hurt them in that realm. And you don't want, they could even become a foster parent and end up seeing this stuff, or like a neighbor of theirs could be in one of these groups and see that stuff. So please, 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 protect their confidentiality and stuff like that, and understand that like most young people are too young to consent to their stuff being shared. But even the older youth, like, they deserve much better than that.
Definitely. As we get to a closing of our time, because, I could talk to you probably for a couple more hours, about many different facets.
Likewise.
My last question for you, as someone who has been in this advocacy realm, someone who has lived experience, someone who has reunified and bridged those gaps, does the work stop, or is it continually happening?
The work is going to keep going on. I mean, like I said, like, progress is slow. It takes patience. I will tell you, just with fostering higher education in Pennsylvania, that advocacy took 10 years to see come to fruition and stuff. But man, did it feel good when it happened. So I just, I tell people, like, keep the faith, like, it might be slow to come and everything, but it can and will happen, and I think we all have to always hold on to and then maintain hope in order to move forward. We have to, we can't quit. Quitting isn't even part of my mantra. Like, that's not, I don't even understand what it's like to quit. Like, I just keep pushing forward and stuff like that. And I'm so connected to all this stuff. Like, I feel like some days I feel like I have every limb in foster care, and there's times that can be exhausting, but then I'm like energized and I'm like, I'm going to take on the world and stuff like that. Like, my husband always says, like, you save the world, I'll make the money. And I'm like, cool, but not yet, because you need to make a little more money for us to do that. But but someday we'll work towards that. Let's go. We're good. So, but yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of work, but I think now in this day and age, like, we're doing more to like elevate lived experience and, having people at the highest level in child welfare policy and stuff with lived expertise. I mean, that's good. And we're also bringing stakeholders from across the board to the table. It's not just foster care alumni, it's foster parents, adoptive parents, birth parents, like, agency workers and stuff like that. Because I feel like having the perspective of all those different hats, I understand how all of them wish to have a voice heard all the time, and I think we all have more in common than most people think. And I just think we need to expand our village a little bit more and just come to the table in unity to make changes to the system. Because the thing is, even if you're on the other side of it, at some point you might not be. Anybody can fall into hard times and stuff like that and go through struggles and need support and potentially end up relying on, something having to do with child welfare.
Thank you. What's next for yourself and your organization?
Well, I mean, for me, last year, well, it's been a busy couple years. I mean, literally every year for 4 years, I kept acquiring children in some way and stuff. And right before the pandemic hit, I had a baby, and I had to pause school. It took me a lot of time to finish college. And last year I completed my degree and my bachelor's degree in business. And I was so excited about that because my mom, my sister, and I all kind of, when I say we dig in, we dig in. Like, we all made the pact to like go back to college together, all graduated and with honors. So, I mean, we did it and we're excited. So, yeah, and a lot of it was like, I like the fact that like I work in child welfare and I advocate in it and stuff like that, but my degree is business, so I look at things a little bit differently sometimes as far as strategically, and I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing, it is going to have an impact and there's purpose to it, and it's also not going to be short-lived. And what we've been doing is building out FosterStrong.org, and we're actually going to be launching a revamped website in a couple of weeks, which I'm really excited about. But it's essentially going to be like a centralized like resource hub for all things foster care, resources for all of the hats that I wear, and then some, like including birth parents too. But yeah, I just found that resources, people need them all the time. I mean, I get calls from people all over the country, but especially Pennsylvania. And whether it's somebody who is in crisis and needs like a mother baby shelter, or a kinship family that needs things for like a grandmother that suddenly has like 5 of their grandbabies, at their doorstep and stuff like that. People need things and they need them quickly. And I realize the average person doesn't have the time to navigate, 20 different websites or toll-free hotline numbers and stuff like that. And I was like, I want to see it all in one place. That way people can just go to the site, click on their state, find out what's close to them, and really elevate some of these smaller nonprofits and programs that people aren't aware of in their own communities, whether it be for them to take advantage of the services or to donate or support or volunteer with them. So I wanted to make all that stuff accessible, and there's no like membership or fee to access all of the resources. That's just kind of my family's gift to everyone else. So, and our hope that other families won't see some of the hurt and the trauma that we've felt throughout the years.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Lastly, because I know how important it is, and having this be in episode 50, I want to make sure that I ask this question, as a person who has been in this advocacy game for a while, and you're at the thriving end of your healing. Has that journey stopped, or is that an ongoing process for you to continue working on healing, self-care, and maintaining mental health and being mindful?
Healing is every day, and it will be every day until I'm like buried in the ground. Like, and that's the truth, because I mean, we as a society, and I think the pandemic and everything with COVID and stuff like that, that really brought it to the forefront with conversations across the board. But I mean, we don't protect our peace, protect our wellness, and take care of ourselves the way we should. I mean, we all kind of, I made the mistake of kind of just burning myself out a lot. I was at every event, I was traveling, I was doing virtual things, I was on committees and boards and stuff like that. And also, making sure I was always there to like sing songs with my kids before bedtime and things like that. And making elaborate dinners and things. And, at some point you really have to take a step back and prioritize your time, and make sure that you're not burning yourself out, because with me in a lot of situations, I kind of became like the bottleneck where a lot of things kind of funneled to me and I just went with it. I thrive in the chaos, but that's also a trauma response too, so while I do thrive in the chaos, I've learned to really enjoy the peace. In fact, I'll be going on vacation soon, and it's going to be the first time where I actually take all my emails off my phone for the vacation. Like, I'm really going to disconnect, I promise. So I was like, I promise, I hope I can do that. So, but really, and I don't know if you ever read it, but years ago, I read this book called The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. And the idea of it, the concept is really neat, where, every year you set out, the happiness project, you set out your goals and stuff for the month and for the week and for the day and stuff. And I do that. So like, I kicked off 2022 with like January was like connecting. So I made sure during the month of January, I connected with people I hadn't talked to in a while that I really wanted to hear from. Or in February, it was like snail mail. So I mailed out letters to people. So that was really neat. But the happiness project is a big way that I practice self-care. And because I'm like really big on organization, I had to kind of find a way to tie that into my own self-care, since I love my Google calendars and all that stuff. So that's self-care is every day, all the time and stuff like that. And it's always a work in progress. We all are, we're all humans. That's what we do. But as long as, I'm getting out of bed and putting one foot in front of the other and my kids are doing well and stuff, I'm good. So
Thank you for that. So powerful. Yeah, I know you wear multiple hats. So this last bit is, what advice do you have? Like, what tips and tidbits? And typically I try to break it down to the hats that the person wears. But you wear so many different hats. We will be here for a while. So I guess I will leave it to you. What advice do you want the audience to take away with, in any lasting comments?
well, I'll say it again because I say it all the time, but give grace to yourself, to others, remove judgment, humble yourself. And especially because it's May and foster care month and mental health awareness month, take a look at all the awareness campaigns and stuff and really educate yourself on what foster care is. And, especially listen to the stories of those with lived expertise. We're out here and we're speaking on things and stuff, and we want you to hear us, because here's the thing: you don't have to be a foster parent to impact foster care. You don't have to be a social worker to impact foster care. I'm not a social worker. I work in child welfare. I do cool things and I love what I do. There's a lot of different avenues you can take, whether it's mentoring, whether it's donating. You can host a drive for essential items that they need. There's so many different lanes. I mean, if you have a nonprofit or an agency or like a county office near you and stuff, reach out to them. I mean, find where you could be most useful. Even if you own a business, you can offer an internship or a job to some young adult that needs one and stuff. So if you own, if you're a landlord, you can maybe provide housing at a discounted rate, or partner with like a SIL program, a supervised independent living program with an agency. Like, the options are endless. So I just urge everyone to kind of look at that. And you'll see on social media and beyond, there's a lot of hashtags for hashtag foster care month, hashtag mental health month. Follow the hashtags and see what's going on around you and everything, and really just take heed of, what's going on and how you can help and serve.
So how can the people listening get connected with you, follow your work?
Well, I have a public Facebook page for myself that's Constance Iannetta, hashtag FosterStrong. You can also follow our FosterStrong social media pages at FosterStrongU. And then our website is fosterstrong.org. But as I mentioned, it's getting a revamp, so it will be extra fancy in a couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, you can always connect with me or the team and stuff like that. If you need a resource in your area, reach out to us. If you have a resource which you'd like, because we have a map of the US, and you can click on every state and see what resources are in your state. Or if you click on the larger map, it shows like national resources and hotlines and stuff like that. So if you have a resource that serves any of the hats in the foster care community, whether it be foster youth, supportive advocates or professionals, birth parents, foster adopted parents, any of those things, please reach out and we'll happily put it on the map.
Thank you. It has been an honor. And
Likewise.
such a privilege, a funny story for you guys listening. We have been following each other on Facebook for years.
Yes. We've crossed paths a
for
lot.
years, for years. And this is one of the first time I'm visually being able to, I mean, we're not, in person, but to meet you and to be acquainted with you. And, we've, been in the same circles, advocating and what have you. And it's such a privilege and such an honor. And truly, this journey has been such a privilege because I've been able to cross paths with people that I've been working with, but have never seen or have seen, but we haven't seen each other in years. So truly, thank you. And it is an honor and a privilege, to be able to follow behind you, in advocacy and take some notes from you and your experience and utilize those in my own personal life, and that's one of the biggest things while doing this podcast. Yes, I have been, trying to educate the communities and what have you, but I've been taking this stuff in myself, and that's one thing I want to promote, that, there's never a moment and where you get to a place where you're not able to receive knowledge and wisdom, and that's something that I'm humbled to be able to receive from yourself and my other guests. So thank you for
Definitely my
sharing.
honor and privilege to be here. And I do want to kind of touch on one of my favorite quotes that you'll probably like, by Frank Warren. And you just made me think of it just because all the amazing stuff you do, and people that you elevate, and the topics you bring awareness to on your podcast. But the Frank Warren quote is, "It's the children the world almost breaks who grow up to change it." So I just want anyone who has experienced any trauma to know, like, you don't have to be like an advocate to, change things. I mean, you can make the change in your home. You're internally, you can make the change. But the point is, just putting one step in front of the other and stuff. And there's also a whole community of us that you can reach out to. Like Michael and I connected and stuff like that. There's so many of us, and we're bonded together through the culture of foster care and, trauma and stuff like that. So
Definitely, definitely. Thank you. You guys know, same spiel, COVID is out there. It is doing its thing, and it's actually, we're gonna be past summer fairly shortly. Some of you guys are in southern states, so everybody's not able, but for you guys that have snow and four seasons and different things like that, and even for just everybody in general, stay safe out there. It was not just COVID, common colds, flu, what have you. Like, we have had a worldwide awakening on health, and not just physical health, but mental health, all of it, emotional health. Let's, step into, you know, this summer, consciously, step into the rest of this foster care awareness month and this mental health awareness month, mindful, of our actions and our thoughts and our village, our people, our circles and stuff like that. And let's have those conversations. Let's communicate. Let's create those spaces for dialogue in our homes, with our families, with our friends, with, our students and what have you. Because it takes all of us to make sure that we all are safe, we all are stable, and we all are functional, in many different aspects more than one. Lastly, I want to say that we talked about a lot of different things. Some things a little bit heavy, some things a little bit light. One thing we talked about was mental health, and I know that affects everyone differently, but one thing I want to push is that there's many narratives and stigmas, culturally or society wise, that are affecting it today. So if you know someone, or if yourself is needing support and what have you, Connie, got a website where it may be some resources out there for you, or she'll
yes,
be more than willing, although
there's a
it
lot of
also
them, and a
myself.
lot are foster care specific for mental health and beyond. So FosterStrong.org, you can definitely take a look and stuff, or reach out to our team. We'd be happy to just email you a list. I mean, we get people reaching out all the time for different things. And we always have an ear to the ground with what's happening and, new programs and stuff. So keep them coming our way, and we'll keep highlighting them on our social media pages and plugging them in on our map on our page. And it's our pleasure, like we really enjoy what we do. And, our team is made up of primarily alumni too, which is, a really nice thing for us to do in kinship together.
So as I ended out, I think it's prominent for me to say this one more time because it's so powerful to me. Third generation foster care alumni that has thrived and reunified with family and have supported each other. You spoke about your mom going back to school and your sister going back to school and what have you guys have found a way back. So I want to leave here saying that it is possible. Unification, prevention, preservation, doing the work, getting out of that place of darkness. It is possible. So
we like to say we grow through what we go through.
That's deep. That's deep. This has been Resilient Voices and Beyond. I hope that you guys have a great night, great morning, great evening, great whenever you listening to this. Just let it be great. And thank you for listening. Until next time.